Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I'm Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today, we're talking about those most addictive VR games, the ones you keep coming back to time and time again, and we'll be separating these titles by genre if you're in the market for an extra long-lasting game. Now, I'd love to hear down in the comments right now what game you just keep coming back to and why. Before we get into that list, this video is brought to you by VR Rock. VR Rock makes prescription lens inserts for all of your favorite VR headsets, and now they have them for the PlayStation VR 2. So if you've been struggling to get your eyeglasses to fit inside the headset, or you're afraid you might scratch the lens, these can be a great option. They magnetically connect, so they're easy to put on and take right back off. And if you're interested, I have a 10% discount code down in the description and a link to their webpage. Now we'll be ordering this list by increasingly more addictive genres, and first up is the single player shooter. While a top-notch single player game is my ideal experience, they generally only last around 10 hours or so. So after about 1 or 2 playthroughs, or less than 20 hours, there's usually not much left to do, except when it comes to shooters like Half-Life and Vertigo. Half-Life Alyx is the gold standard when it comes to VR graphics, immersion, and storytelling. It's filled with excellent combat and some truly memorable moments. You should definitely experience it more than once, and if you're up for a challenge, try collecting the gnome. But what really gives it staying power is the mods. There's plenty of minor experiences to give you a cheap thrill, but even better are whole new campaigns, like the BioShock remake Return to Rapture, Half-Life Levitation, and Incursion. Vertigo 1 and 2 are extremely similar in this regard. They have extremely unique campaigns that'll keep you wondering what will happen next, and I once again definitely recommend you play them more than once. But the Sandbox Mode DLC is what adds so much extra content. Not only can you build your own experience with zero modding or programming experience, but you could also try out everything the community has to offer. Now, another aspect of VR that always has been coming back to certain titles is showcasing some games to VR noobs. Anyone who's truly into VR loves introducing new people to this technology, and as much as you might want to take these new users into the most over-the-top experiences, that's usually a bit too overwhelming. Instead, I start with games like Space Pirate Trainer. Space Pirate Trainer is an excellent wave shooter that just feels so natural and has a rocking soundtrack to pump you up. Anyone can instantly get into it, but there's definitely enough strategy to keep you playing long term. Even after years of playing a huge array of VR titles, Space Pirate Trainer is still a game I love every time I turn it on. Now, if you're a bit more of a sadist, Richie's playing experience is the way to go. It's a fantastic way to show off just how immersive VR can be, and it's also a great spectator sport. Just don't do something foolish like shove someone while they're walking the plank, and everyone should have a great time. But if your VR crowd isn't that brave, Beat Saber is another excellent choice. Similar to Space Pirate Trainer, this is another highly intuitive title. There's also an absolutely insane amount of replay value, as it takes forever to master this title, and they just keep adding so many new songs. But we'll come back to Beat Saber a little bit later in this video. If I happen to be introducing people to VR who are looking for more action, or seem like they could handle a more powerful VR experience, well then I'll usually move on to Boneworks or Blade and Sorcery. With some of the best melee and shooter mechanics found in VR, both of these titles do an amazing job showing off just how physically immersive VR can be. And don't worry, because both of these games will be showing up again on this list in other genres. But besides showcasing VR to newcomers, what tends to bring people back to games is competitive multiplayer. From here we have everything from shooters to card games and even mini golf. On the shooter front, Pavlov is a fantastic option. This Counter-Strike clone is nearly as addictive as its inspirational title, and it offers up nearly as many game mods. You could try out everything from Call of Duty Zombies, World War II tank driving, all the way to hand grenade dodgeball. So if you're looking for a shooter with nearly unlimited options, go jump into Pavlov. Now, since the full version of Pavlov is not available on Quest, an excellent alternative is Contractors. Not only do you get a great military-themed shooter, but the modding community here is absolutely insane, and you can experience the multiplayer from completely separate games like Halo, Star Wars Battlefront, and even Team Fortress 2. Now, if you're an extraction shooter fan, the way to go is Ghost of Tabor. Recently released in early access, this title is doing fantastically well. Going on scavenging runs and building up your inventory is absolutely addictive. You never know what to expect, and there's always plenty of risk versus reward. But if shooters aren't your style, let's move on to Cards and Tankards. Now, maybe not as popular as some of the other games found on today's list, this free-to-play trading card game has absolutely sucked me in. It doesn't matter if you're highly competitive or a casual player, this game is always fun to experience and has a fantastic community surrounding it. The developers have been going to great lengths to keep pushing out new updates and to snuff out any toxicity in their online gameplay. But speaking of constant developer support, we have Walkabout Mini Golf. Mighty Coconut just keeps giving us more and more reasons to return to this game. From the start, it was already an amazing mini golf simulator, but their work in creating officially licensed courses from other IPs has been absolutely phenomenal. Just like mini golf in real life, it's a game you could always come back to and have a great time in. But to jump back to shooters for a moment, we have Population 1. The undisputed VR Battle Royale has kept its community engaged for years by constantly pushing out exciting new content and events, but their latest update introduced a whole new sandbox mode, which allows for completely unique user-generated content. And since Population 1 is now a sandbox title, it carries us into the next genre. Sandbox games are all about making your own fun, and that can include anything from building whole new content to just fooling around in games like Boneworks and Bone Lab. These titles offer up the ultimate sandbox to play in. You could spawn in a huge array of weapons and enemies, discover a countless array of ways to dispatch your foes, create some absolutely ridiculous clips for YouTube or TikTok, and just continue to have a blast for hours on end. If sandbox titles are what you're looking for, there's really not much better in VR except for maybe Blade and Sorcery. So from here, you'll move on from a sci-fi theme into more of a fantasy setting. You'll replace guns with spells and underground facilities with medieval villages, but you'll also have plenty of amazing combat. There's also a huge assortment of mods for Blade and Sorcery that can turn you into your favorite hero from the MCU, or you can become a Jedi utilizing some force powers and a lightsaber. But if sandbox titles aren't for you, let's move on to one of my favorite genres, which are co-op games. First on that list is After the Fall, which is basically VR's Left 4 Dead. Go ahead and grab 3 of your friends, mow down a huge horde of zombies, collect some harvest to unlock new gear and cosmetics, and then do it all over again. It's an absolutely addictive gameplay loop, and the content that Vertigo Games has added over time has helped to keep it feeling fresh. But if shooters aren't your style, I highly recommend you check out Demeo. This strategy-based tabletop experience is an absolute blast. Again, you can play with up to 3 of your friends, and there's a truly unique array of characters to choose from and dungeons to explore. And if you need a break from the challenge that Demeo poses, there's both a social hub and ability to paint some minis. But maybe you're all about the challenge, and that's why our next genre is the roguelikes. Until You Fall remains one of my favorite VR games of all time. It has some truly strategic melee-based combat and an addictive gameplay loop that'll have you coming back for more and more, and you'll only stop because you're completely exhausted. So if you enjoy the added benefit of your VR titles also being a bit of cardio, Until You Fall is the absolute best option. Now maybe slightly easier on your heart is In Death Unchained, unless of course you're easily frightened. This archery-themed journey through the afterlife offers up an extreme challenge. It also features some excellent VR locomotion mechanics, as you could use your bow to teleport around the screen. In true roguelike fashion, you'll feel like you're kicking butt for a while, until the title quickly humbles you. This experience, the huge number of unlockables, and the constant new season updates will keep pulling you back into this game. But an even more addictive genre are The Sims. You can get lost in something like Microsoft Flight Simulator for a nearly infinite amount of time. Not only can you spend countless hours just learning to use your instruments, but you could also fly around the world in real time. So if you ever wanted to be a captain of your own 12-hour flight, or get up close and personal with the 9 wonders of the world, go ahead and check out Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now, if you prefer to remain grounded, Gran Turismo 7 can definitely suck you in. Designed to be extremely authentic and true to life, with a huge amount of unlockables and customization, this title is a racing sim's dream. Even someone like myself, who's really not into the whole sim scene, thoroughly enjoyed this title, just like our next title, Vital. Vital straddles that line between fighter plane sim and arcade action. It's definitely complex enough to be a little intimidating, but definitely not to the point where you feel like you need to go to flight school first. There's also plenty of user-generated content available for this game, making it extremely addictive. But when it comes to addictive flight sims, I think of Elite Dangerous. It's actually quite common to hear from people who have been playing this open world space sim for thousands of hours. A quick glance at the Steam reviews, and even those who don't recommend the title have still played it for hundreds of hours. Now, I personally found it a bit too overwhelming to get into, but after launching over 7 years ago, this game still has over 4,000 daily active players. And part of that is because Elite Dangerous also rolls over into our next genre, which is both open world and RPG titles. Spacefaring and open world seem to go together because our next title is No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky is everyone's favorite comeback story. After a rocky launch, it eventually turned into an extremely beloved title, and probably the biggest world that you could actively explore in VR. There's also so much more to do now besides just explore. You could build base stations or mechs to pilot, engage in epic space battles, meet alien races, and visit countless planets. No Man's Sky is another one of those open world games that you could basically live your whole life in, similar to what people do in Skyrim VR. Now, unlike No Man's Sky, the majority of those new features and immersion doesn't come from updates, but rather the modding community. After about 200 gigs of mods, you could turn Skyrim into a whole new experience that is not only absolutely stunning, but features plenty of mechanics that make it feel like it was a native VR game. You could actually do things like shout in real life to activate your in-game shouts, and people have even integrated ChatGPT into the NPCs, enabling some dynamic dialogue. Now, if you want to swap fantasy for sci-fi, you could do all of the above with Fallout 4 VR. Another huge open world RPG that just gets so much better in VR thanks to the modding community. Now, it's already commonly known how addictive these titles can be, so I don't think I have to spend much more time there. But moving on in our ever more addictive genres, we have the rhythm games. I mentioned we'd come back to Beat Saber, and here it is. The fact that the game is always fun and so easy to get into already keeps you coming back for more, but if you're someone who likes a challenge, you're gonna spend a lot of hours mastering some songs. And that song list just keeps getting longer and longer thanks to both official updates and the modding community. Now, in terms of official updates, we should also include both Synth Riders and Pistol Whip on this list. They both have that same addictive gameplay loop of Beat Saber, but you might prefer waving your arms or shooting guns rather than slicing blocks. And they're also constantly adding either new VR experiences or single-player style campaigns. So it's easy to see why rhythm titles have become so addictive in VR. But what really has the tendency to take over people's lives are those social experiences. The first obvious one is VR chat, which grew to the point that HBO actually did a documentary on it. We met in virtual reality, followed a bunch of individuals who are basically now living their lives inside of VR chat. They have full relationships and even jobs. This is absolutely wild to think about and feels like the start of some sci-fi movie. Now, some other examples are Rec Room, which is more centered around social gameplay, and of course there's Neos VR for those who like to push this technology to the max. No matter what your preference is, it's easy to understand how people can spend so many hours in these experiences. It's the virtual version of going to your favorite hangout spot or bar. You know all of your buddies will be there and you'll have a great time. And that right there was my list by genre of the most addictive VR games. Now, I'm sure I probably missed some of your favorite titles or even a few genres, so let me know what they are down in the comments right now.
And that was today's video, brought to you by my dad, Mateo311. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here,
Consider subscribing.
consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
Consider subscribing.
We'll see you guys on next time.
We'll see you guys on next time.